So overview, why we do developmental evaluation. Talking now about the what more and the how. I think as evaluators, we have sort of this amazing methodological toolbox. I think you can give us any situation or context and we can gather information from it. We know how to design surveys, we know how to ask questions, we know how to do interviews, focus groups. But really, you want to make sure that the tool that you have is suited to the situation that you're in. I might have a drill, and the drill might do a really good job of putting holes in the wall, but it's not going to do such a great job of putting tile and grout, in the backsplash of my kitchen. So you really need to be conscious about, how your evaluation reflects the work that you're doing and the way that it's being done. And with a developmental approach, if I go there next. Oops, I keep pressing the wrong button. So when a developmental approach makes sense is very much in those emerging complex contexts when that direction where you're going isn't necessarily known. So if you think back to that chart or the boat and the two islands, we don't necessarily know what direction we're going to be taking with that boat, but we want to be able to track its course and learn something from it as we go. When your partners and your collaborators might change and grow, some people might become part of the process. Others might leave for whatever reason. You might look around and say, who's not engaged, who needs to be engaged. Let's bring those folks on board. There needs to also be a lot of openness to engagement and reflection. I think, evaluation takes time. Developmental evaluation can take even more time. That it is an investment in the process, and spending time thinking and reflecting about what you're doing, why you're doing it, asking those critical questions. And also, there needs to be some comfort there with ambiguity. And shifting processes. So if you're one of those people that likes the logic model, likes that very linearity, likes the clarity of having all your activities defined and those clear relationships down to outcomes, that doesn't work so well, and it can create some tensions. And being open to that, being open to the ambiguity and not always knowing the direction that you're going in and sort of figuring out how that works as you go along. This is when developmental evaluation would make sense. And in that, what the role of the evaluator is, in a developmental evaluation, the researcher is very much embedded in the process. So as part of sitting around the table, asking questions, encouraging the thoughtfulness and the reflection, very engaged. It's really one of the team as an evaluator, unlike other kinds of evaluations where the evaluator might be a little bit more removed, more external. The developmental evaluator is very involved. And I think in a typical evaluation process, this is how I define my role. The first thing I do is, I ask a lot of questions. I sort of get a real good sense of the program, how it operates, who everybody is. I listen to that, figure out what the priorities are. I come up with a research design, implement that research design, do that, follow through, take all that information back, do my analysis, and then share it back with the group. In a developmental evaluation, my process is much more reciprocal and iterative. So there is that asking a lot of questions, listening, distilling the information. So, identifying what this means in this context and, supporting the group to identify what some of the priorities are that comes out in the information that we're collecting, sharing that, and reflecting on it, and then continuing that cycle around again. So less linear, more iterative. I think that's what, in thinking about developmental evaluation and other forms, I think this really characterizes those two differences. One of the key points I keep talking about is that, that learning emphasis and learning and reflecting. And some of those questions, those 5 questions that Ian gave this morning, also work really well in a developmental context. So never stop questioning what you're doing. The asking the what, the so what, and now what. That real emphasis on that inquiry framework. what are the critical decisions that have been made over this process? Why did we decide that at this time? What were the implications of that? What can we learn? How are these innovations? How are these changes? What difference are they making? How are they engaging people in different ways? How can we inform the development of new activities? If what we're doing isn't making sense or we're having a lot of great success, how can we expand that and develop other activities? Expand the project, as that's what's needed at this time. Where do we want to go next? Where are we now? And how are we working with others? What is the collaboration? How effective is it? So really, that continual process of questioning, that asking, that listening, asking and listening, reflecting, really informs the whole process of doing a developmental evaluation. So in that process, it isn't a linear, you're not lining everybody up and going forward. You're really navigating the sort of the systems of snakes and ladders. You have successes that bring you up, but there's also tensions and challenges, that might feel like they're setting you back. And it's really about sort of navigating, negotiating, pulling people around and trying to get them through this process so that you all end up in, the place that you wanted to be in the beginning. So I would say, as an evaluator, that a good evaluation, regardless of whether it's developmental or not, really reflects the context of that which it is trying to evaluate. So if you have a program that is well established, that is running, and you might want to adapt it to a new context, that doesn't necessarily require, very much of a developmental approach, but you can have something of a developmental attitude. You can, reflect on those questions and bring them into a more traditional or conventional evaluation. But you want to make sure that what you're doing is reflecting what it is you're trying to evaluate. So big, messy, complex, emerging initiatives, you will probably end up with a lot messier, complex and emerging kind of evaluation plan. Well-established program, clear activities, good understanding of outcomes, you'll probably have a much cleaner and neater and straightforward evaluation plan. Although you might, add a developmental attitude to that. So we created this handout, and Alexis have these, which she'll bring around to everybody. But just in thinking about what evaluation path should you follow, and I know that this, keeps things fairly linear as well, but it doesn't have to be, you can borrow from side to side. And just in thinking about when you're embarking on evaluation, the kind of evaluation that you'd want to do, those questions at the top, what pressures are we under? If accountability is a really key part of the need, very pressing, you have pressures from funders or donors that really want to understand what the results and the outcomes are, you're going to need to ask some results and outcome-based questions and make sure that you can answer that in some way. What are those pressures? What is most critical for us to know? Where are you at in your program? What do you need to know next in order to help you move forward? Thinking about those answers can help guide the kind of evaluation that you want to do and the kind of questions that you need to ask. So evaluation needs to support learning. It also needs to be strategic in order to be useful and valuable. It has to answer in what needs you have at the moment. How clear is our course of action? Do we know which path we're taking, or are we going to figure that out as we go along? How much control and influence do we have? Are we talking about one organization and we're evaluating a single program within that organization, so the control and the influence over how that program happens is much well defined? Or are we talking about a collaboration where we're bringing a number of different partners together and we're trying to solve much more challenging social issue where our control and influence is not so great, that we're really just trying to make a contribution rather than controlling what happens. And in splitting that, if you know what you're doing and you have a good, well-defined program with those clear activities, established partners, and a fair sense of what those outcomes are, you're probably leaning towards a much more traditional kind of evaluation. And I'm saying traditional, that doesn't mean that it's not a good evaluation or it can't support learning or innovation, but just that the way you look at and measure the program can tend to be more in the summative or formative path. So summative evaluation is one where you're looking at your outcomes sort of at the end of the project, making a decision as to whether or not this is something you want to continue with. A formative evaluation is around looking at what is working. How well is it working? Where are we making a difference? And then really looking towards strategy and improvement. How are you going to do a better job of that? Most of the evaluation work that I do probably tends to be in the formative pathway, but a lot of it has, could have more of a developmental attitude, but it could also bring in some of those summative questions as well. So not to give the sense that you have to do this one, you have to do this one, or you have to do the other one, but that just as a way of thinking and framing what it is you're doing with the evaluation. In that developmental side, as I said, it's really more around figuring it out as you go along. That focus is much more complex, not just the situation, but the program itself and the set of activities also reflect that complexity. And thinking about a program in the region of Waterloo, the support to end persistent homelessness is a large umbrella strategy funded by the region of Waterloo to really tackle and support people who have experienced homelessness for 10 or more years, or housing instability for more than 10 years, and transition them into a home, into greater stability. As an umbrella, it is complex. You have multiple partners, multiple programs, figuring out how to work together, how to support people who live very complex lives into housing. You drill down to a single program within that umbrella that has a solid organizational history, it might not be much more formative than developmental. So just thinking about, at what level are you looking? And in that developmental, where you're sort of, heading towards that sort of creative design, how are we going to do things differently? How are you going to tackle this same old problem in a new and different way to create change? These two continue on, that they don't end there, where some of it more traditionally ends with a clear decision, but the process can be iterative. It needs to be ongoing. So I've chatted a lot. Any questions or thoughts?
What does
Iterative, sorry. When you do something and then you go back and you do it again, that ongoing repetition of a process. So you don't ask a question, get an answer, and then your solution. You ask a question, get an answer, think about it, ask another question, and just that's cyclical.
So kind of like golfing.
Kind of like golfing, I guess, yes. I don't know, I don't golf. Any questions? So now I just wanted to talk about the social prosperity developmental evaluation and just sort of walk you through what a developmental evaluation would look like in practice.